Welcome to Football Never Sleeps. Aspire to be viral, necessarily caffeinated, and this week rerouted. This is your weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base that got into some colorful Twitter spats on my timeline this weekend. I'm Eric Hansen, back from Columbus, Ohio, in South Bend after covering the women's basketball team storming to the Sweet 16. He's Tyler James in the port and covering extra football since I was storming. Together we're the word salad avoiding content creators at blueandgold.com, part of a mega team covering the Irish for the On3 network. On tonight's show, spring football finally kicked off and we have early impressions for you without hopefully overly extrapolating. We also had Pro Day at the IAC today, a massive recruiting weekend for juniors, and we have your questions and our answers, so start filling up the question portal. This is
Football Never Sleeps.
Let's get it.
All right. Thank you to everyone tuning in live and spending a rare Tuesday night with us. I don't know if the rumors are true, but I hear Tuesday nights are better Football Never Sleeps episodes than Monday nights, but we'll see if we can match that. We appreciate everyone being flexible with their schedule around the women's basketball tournament schedule. Shout out to the folks already lively in the chat: Irish fans, Scott, Outbound, Todd, Mike Singer over there with from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish Blue and Gold channel, Mike DeVoy, Scott, if I didn't say your name already, Jeff, we appreciate you guys all chiming in already tonight. Whether you're watching us live or on replay, please make sure that you're subscribed to us here on the channel. Make sure you hit the like button as well, and we'd love to hear from you in the chat. The Blue and Gold On3 and Rivals spring sale is still available, so if you haven't subscribed to blueandgold.com, this is the time to do so. New subscribers get 50% off the first year of an annual subscription. So instead of costing you nearly $120, it's $59.99 for the first year. So take advantage of that deal before it expires this spring. Use the link that's in our video description below or head over to blueandgold.com and hit the join button. No promo code needed. That is our spring sale. All right, and it is spring in South Bend as Notre Dame started spring football practice last week. Notre Dame took the field on Friday for its first practices on Saturday as well, but we didn't get to see that one. We got to see all of Friday's practice. Eric, let's start with what your biggest takeaways were from that practice.
So for me, I spent most of my time watching the offense because that's what I was assigned to do. And for me, I would have spent a lot of time on that side of the ball anyways. A team that's built for speed, and you could really see it in the drills. That's one of the things that you can usually tell the first day is relative speed and athleticism, and it just felt like a different kind of practice. And it was in so many places, so many different position groups where it showed up. That was my number one takeaway. There were some others, how the offensive line was configured. That was interesting to me. Noah Grubbs, just seeing what he looked like throwing the ball, what he looked like physically. That was a big takeaway. Again, I didn't watch as much defense, except when Tate Johnson made me do it. So those are my takeaways. How about yours?
Well, if you only watched when Tate Johnson made you, that means you watched a lot of defense, but
I did.
That's how good he was. I agree with you. I thought in addition to the speed, there was a lot of physicality in that first practice. Like, it was not like a walkthrough by any means. They weren't wearing pads, but they were getting after it. There was even some chippiness beyond the whistle between some guys, Cooper Flanagan and Jalen Sneed. We're going at it a little bit. Jordan Faison and Don Schuler. Even during a play, Ethan Long was, I described it as giving the business to Caden Finley during a rep and a route. He really sort of, there was maybe a welcome to college moment for Caden Finley, but I thought it was an exciting practice to watch. I wish it would have lasted longer. I could have sat there. You're really like, oh man, I miss football. It really made me miss football, but glad that spring football is here. A lot of good on good segments of practice that Marcus Freeman sort of told us we should expect because of the length of the off season for Notre Dame. So I was impressed by that. And I'm really interested to see how that helps Notre Dame long term in terms of where they're at with all these guys already know how to do individual drills. Now it's a matter of putting things together and getting after it as a unit. So a lot to like there. And then I guess one thing before we get into more specifics about players, I just like the gap between CJ Carr and the backup quarterbacks is pretty wide. That's not surprising, but I think even though CJ Carr threw a couple of interceptions, I was like, oh yeah, that's why CJ Carr is, and that's why there's a question about who's going to be Notre Dame's backup quarterback going into next season.
Sounds good.
All right, let's get into some of the depth charts we saw. That especially the first practice, like it's a lot of like, okay, who's lining up where? We want to get a better sense for that. What stood out to you in terms of where guys were aligning, where they were in the pecking order with things?
Right. And remember, the depth charts are in pencil and there's pieces missing everywhere for injuries. But having said all that, the offensive line depth chart was interesting, not just in who lined up in the first five, but who were in the second, third five, and so forth. The big headliner was Will Black playing left tackle, Anthony Knapp playing left guard. As far as defense, I didn't watch it as much. I looked at our reports and so forth. It was interesting to me where the DBs lined up and what they were doing, who they were covering. So those were the two big ones. The linebacker, there's so many people missing right now that I'm not sure that we're getting an accurate picture of that. With the defensive line, I feel like Charlie Partridge needs to see those guys in pads before we start seeing up and down movement and so forth. But, and where the wide receivers lined up was interesting. There wasn't any surprises for me there. And the running backs, I thought they were going to ask us to come out of the off the media area and come be the fourth and fifth string running back because they don't have a lot of numbers, but they have quality.
Well, thankfully they didn't ask any of their support staffs to play running back either. I don't know if you saw the video of the support staffers running the 40-yard dash that Notre Dame football shared yesterday. I thought it was pretty funny. Although Sean Sivers, who's on staff as an assistant wide receivers coach who played running back in college and in the NFL briefly, he got after it. I think he was 4'8" or 4'7". Like he still can move. But there weren't a lot of blazing 40s there. You could add us to the list in terms of 40s that would be on the day side of things rather than the second side of things.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident I can run a 4.5, 4 days and 5 hours.
Some of the depth chart things that stood out to me, just to see Mylan Graham in the slot, I think it makes some sense, especially when Jaden Greathouse wasn't practicing, that he would spend most of his practice there. I'm curious how much he moves around moving forward. Logan Saldate being bumped from the slot where he has played most of his career to the field, I thought was interesting. That opened up opportunities for Bubba Frazier and Caden Finley in the slot as sort of the second and third team guys in Friday's practice. The offensive line, like you mentioned, Black at left tackle, Knapp at left guard. I thought it was interesting that Matty Augustine was taking number 2 reps, both at right guard and right tackle. Curious if that is maybe a chance to try to get him to push Sullivan Absher in any way to keep things competitive there on the right side. And then not necessarily too surprising when you think about who's available and healthy, but Nick Reddish sort of being the backup nickel right away, at least in that first practice. I thought that sort of stood out, and he made a play. He may have had a pick 6, and so I thought the nickelback position played pretty well between Dallas Golden. I almost called him Al Golden and Nick Reddish. But to see a freshman given those responsibilities, I thought was interesting. All right, let's get into best and brightest. Which 5 players do you think had the best performances in Friday's practice?
Yeah, and that's reasons. One is I did spend so much time watching the offense, so I'm going to stick mostly with my expertise there, with one exception. And the other thing that's hard on this is, okay, CJ Carr and Jordan Faison, we expect them to look really good, and so I didn't put them on my list. So that doesn't mean, oh my God, CJ Carr has fallen off. lists that On3 had on the national scene with CJ Carr as the 10th best quarterback are really true, or maybe worse. No, he was really good. And so was Jordan Faison. But Tay Johnson was number one for me, just because he kept photobombing my offensive stuff. Two, I had Mylan Graham. I think there were receivers that were maybe more consistent than him, but just I'm projecting. I think this is going to look like in a week or two. Just the way he moves, the speed, the fluidity. I mean, I even like the position drills can be pretty boring. He makes them exciting. Micah Gilbert was on my list. Aeneas Williams, for a guy that had a red jersey on, did a lot, including coaching up the other running backs. I love Nolan James Jr., what I saw of him in a practice without pads. And a lot of that had to do with him in the passing game. I think he'll do really well in the running game as well. But his presence in the passing game was really big for me. A couple of the people that I wandered into my consciousness on defense. Ethan Long showed up for me. Dallas Golden did. I watched a little bit of Christian Gray because I wanted to see what he looked like. So how about you? That was more than five, and that was more than who was really good.
That's all right. We'll take whatever you want to tell us about, Eric. The five guys that I singled out were Tay Johnson, number one. I think if anyone put anyone besides Tay Johnson at number one from that practice, they're probably related to whoever they put at number one. Number two, I put Dallas Golden. I thought he had a pretty good practice at nickelback, and it's going to be interesting what happens there moving forward with Christian Gray being given opportunities. DJ McKinney's not here yet, so Christian Gray still played on the outside in Friday's practice. What does that look like long term? I'm curious, but Dallas Golden, day one, impressed me. Number three, I put right tackle Gerby Lambert. I thought he was the most impressive of Notre Dame's offensive linemen in Friday's practice. Now, obviously, we're talking about a practice that they're not wearing pads, and so it's a little bit different. But him playing a new position, moving from right guard to right tackle, I thought he looked great. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to be playing there, and so I wanted to include him on my list. Aeneas Williams, I put at 4. It's someone who didn't expect to be doing a lot in practice, and other than wearing the red jersey and not taking every rep, and the giant brace he has on his elbow, you wouldn't necessarily know that he was limited in many capacities. So I thought he looked good, had a nice long swing wheel route touchdown reception that I think is something that he'll be very talented at doing moving forward. And then fifth was someone on the surprise side, linebacker Ko'okia. I thought he stood out and did some things nicely in a practice where you don't really expect to notice the linebackers much in a non-padded practice. I think he had a strip. He was flying around the field and one of the guys that's been given more opportunities with some unhealthy linebackers right now. So I thought he deserved a mention in my top 5 players list.
Cool. And I didn't put the linemen in there just because I didn't watch them interact a lot, and I did discount the fact they weren't in pads, and that's why I didn't watch them. They were more physical in this practice, as you mentioned off the top of the show, than normally are on the first day. But I was trying to get the lines right in terms of who was playing where on each of the lines. That was kind of a priority for me.
Yeah, I can't help myself when they do like one-on-one pass pro. Like I have to be watching it. It doesn't matter if they're not wearing any pads. If they're just wearing helmets, I still want to watch it. So I caught most of that while they're.
You had a better vantage point than us too when you had the video camera.
Yeah, that's true. So I was able to get some of the alignment from the drill work that they were doing too. In terms of surprises, I mentioned Ko'okia as one. Which 5 players would you categorize as surprises that surprised you the most on Friday?
Right. And I went on offense, and I'm like, sometimes I have different expectations than I think the regular fan base does. But so I included a person that I was not surprised by, but I think the fan base would be. For me, the number one surprise was Jerome Bettis Jr. I think that I saw a graphic on social media where it was predicting a breakthrough season based on this one practice. Now, I think that's going too far.
Yeah.
But I think he obviously transformed his body, and he was catching a lot of balls, and he was very consistent. He was very impressive. But when you look at what the depth chart is at that boundary receiver spot, he's got a lot of people to jump over to have a breakthrough season. But taking nothing away from the effort that he did to put himself in the best position to help the team. So that's why he's number one for me. 2 was Cam Williams. Not a surprise for me. I've been getting intel about what's been going on with him from behind the scenes. Mike Singer has 2, and it showed up. And I'm really excited to see more of him. Huge shock for me, and I think some of this was because Chris Tarrick wasn't available, but Devin Houston was in the number 2 group at guard. Number 4 for me was Noah Grubbs. Not that I was surprised at what he would look like. I think I was surprised at the velocity on his passes based on, and this isn't on our recruiting guys, just based on people kind of on a national scene questioning whether he had arm strength. I went, whoa, not today. That's not a problem today.
Yeah.
You know, his body looks like a high school kid. I mean, if you walked in and you had never seen Notre Dame football and you said, which one of those 3 quarterbacks should be a senior in high school right now? You know, he's got the slimmer shoulders. He just has that high school build.
Yeah.
And Lauren Landau changed that. And then for me, I think Jack Larson is. I think he's a guy that could really get lost in that tight end room, given the people that are coming back, given the people that are coming in, like Preston Frizzell and eventually Ian Premer. And Jack Larson didn't get lost, I thought, in those practices. So for me, those were the 5 guys.
Yeah, I think those all make sense. I included since I included some defensive guys, I did include both Williams and Bettis on mine. Williams is like, I felt like that was the most impressive practice I've seen him have. And
by far,
because we haven't seen stuff like that before, even though you sort of hope that he reaches his potential and believe that there's still a possibility for that to happen. This to be like an actual sign to see with your own eyes, I still would call that a surprise. Kia was number 1 for me. That was someone that I hadn't really thought much about, and maybe won't think much about going into the season when Notre Dame has all of its linebackers healthy. But I think that's an important thing long term for Notre Dame to have sort of the next round of a linebacker. Yeah, the next wave of linebackers ready to go because they could lose a lot after this next season at that position. Ebenezer Iwatade looked more physically prepared than I expected him to. I thought there would be more of a clear like body difference between him and Rodney Dunham. And I didn't think like Ebenezer Iwatade didn't look that much different than like Boubacar Traore. And he was far more physically advanced than I remember from seeing him walking around on campus during a junior day or at a game. So I think he's come a long way in where he is in terms of his physical readiness to contribute. I think he's more of a raw prospect than Rodney Dunham is between the 2 freshman defensive ends who are early enrolled. But I liked what I saw from him. And then 5th, it was Nick Reddish, who I mentioned earlier, had the pick 6. He's another guy. He's thicker than I expected. I mean, he looks closer to a linebacker than a cornerback. Now he's not very tall, but in terms of his physical build, even in like his thighs, like he's got a strong base to him, and so you would expect him to be able to handle playing in the box at times and doing stuff like that when asked to. Maybe that's not early in his career, but eventually. And so I always thought he could be a nickelback in Notre Dame. To see him step up and play that way in his first practice, I thought was impressive. All right, let's hop into the questions we have here. First one is from Sid Irish. Did Malachi Fields run the 40 today?
He did not. I thought he would rerun it. I think he reran. I think he did the 20 shuttle or the cone drills. I've got it here.
Yeah, he did the 20 shuttle. And that was it. He had the bench. I don't think he did the 3 cone.
Yeah, he just did the bench and the 20-yard shuttle today. He did not rerun the 40.
So he stuck with his 4.61 40 from the NFL Combine. All right. Hold on here. I lost my questions. Jeff Stevens says, why is Aeneas Williams practicing when he is supposed to be limited contact? Isn't it a risk?
Well, it was allegedly a non-contact present practice, and apparently he didn't think it was a risk. We'll have a chance to talk to him and Jawan Sider tomorrow, and so we can ask him about that. I think he probably just is stubborn, and he was coaching too, and I think if I had seen Nolan James running around like he was, I think I would have said, yeah, my elbow's fine. I think I'm going to go out here and take a few reps. So we'll get some clear answers on that tomorrow.
Yeah, he's wearing a red jersey, so any contact that happens will be the result of a teammate not adhering to the rules, and they'll get an earful. Like he's not like running away from people, or like he's not playing as if he has an injured elbow or is recovering from an injured elbow. He does have a big brace on. I'm sure whatever level of protection that provides is enough to where Notre Dame feels like it's not a risk for him to go out there and catch passes and run around and do drills. He's not getting tackled. There's no like helmets hitting his elbow, so there's not a lot of contact. So when he's playing a non-contact practice, especially on a non-padded practice, that's easier. And like when they do inside run drills, for instance, he's not doing those portions because you're running in between bodies. You're going to run into teammates and stuff like that. Those are different things. That 7-on-7 and stuff like that, and individual drills are the things that he can do. And I'm sure there's some drills that would require him to sit out, and some drills that he's able to participate in. Another injury-related question from Jeff: will you guys be able to talk to Charles Jagusa this spring, and would you expect an honest assessment of his health?
I think we've got an honest assessment of his health. If we do talk to him, it would be this week. I think it would be Friday. I'm not sure if they'll roll him out there or not. I think that's probably going to be up to him. And it would be pretty interesting. I'll tell you what, he's a great interview. He's always been really honest and a really thoughtful guy. I interviewed him as a high school senior and just was so impressed. I thought, why wasn't I like this when I was 17 or 18 or 32? But yeah, I think when we do talk to him, he's going to be really, really insightful. And I think Notre Dame has been upfront with us about this, especially with Rob Hunt the other day. He answered all the questions.
All right. Todd Krall says, do we know when they will be releasing the kickoff times for the season, for this season's home games, besides Miami and probably the opener? I'm guessing Michigan State would be a night game.
I'm not sure about if Michigan State would be a night game. It seems like, Tyler, isn't it May that the kickoff times usually come?
Yeah, I looked it up. May was when we found out last year. So if they stick to a similar schedule, that would be when we would find out again this year. So Michigan State, maybe. I don't know if there's another obvious home game. I think you'd like to have a night home game when it's still good weather, and Michigan State would fit that, because otherwise you're looking at maybe Stanford on October 10th, and then not another opportunity before that Miami game, and then I would doubt either Boston College or SMU in November will be night games. So I would guess Michigan State would probably make the most sense, like you suggested there, Todd.
And you got to remember the calculus is a little bit different. The Big Ten also has NBC games, and so they figure out, what are good night games for them. And I think that figures into Notre Dame's calculus too.
Outbound says, do you think maybe the Shamrock Series uniforms, maybe the white jerseys with green numbers in honor of Lou, would be an awesome tribute to the legend?
I'll let you answer the jersey question.
If I had to guess, whatever Notre Dame is doing for the Shamrock Series uniforms for the game at Lambeau Field, they've already been they're already well designed. Like, they're already done. They probably were done before Lou's passing. If I had to guess, I would expect there to be something to signify Lou, whether it's, we've talked about before, the little thing above the face mask on the helmet. They did era up there. I would expect probably Lou to be there. I don't know if they'll do like a jersey patch or something. I would be a little bit surprised if the Shamrocks, if they had enough time to sort of audible whatever plan they had for the Shamrock Series uniforms, unless maybe there's just a happy coincidence that they were thinking of it being something that was Lou Holtz themed. But you would think maybe Green Bay themed in some way, but I don't know. I haven't heard anything about what those uniforms are supposed to look like.
Whatever he said.
Scott, here's a question that you'll be happy to answer. Scott Fegan says, the new coaches, who will make the biggest impact?
Whew. Charlie Partridge is my answer, just because of what he's challenged with and what his skill set is, and his familiarity with Chris Ash, and his comfortability of saying, no, Chris, that's a stupid idea. I think it's Charlie Partridge for me.
Yeah, I think there's too many things that stack up in Partridge's favor in terms of like the room for improvement from last season with last year's defensive line to this year's line. I think there is that room for that. Like Aaron Henry could be a great defensive backs coach. Are the DBs going to be that much better than they were last year? Yeah. Like that would be difficult to do. That doesn't mean he can't be a great coach for Notre Dame, but I think the standard is already very high there. Linebackers, again, we're talking, especially at that position, you got so many of the same guys there. So I don't know that we're going to see a huge difference that Brian Jean-Marie can make in his first season at Notre Dame. And so I think Partridge is in the perfect position to impact Notre Dame. He's in a setting that we believe he should be comfortable with in terms of working for Chris Ash and getting back into the college game. So I think everything's sort of aligned for him to have the biggest impact of Notre Dame's new coaches.
And I'll say this about all three of them. All three made really positive first impressions on me. I like them all.
Yeah, I think it's easier to understand why they end up at Notre Dame if we got a chance to talk to them. All right, I wanted to spin forward a little bit, Eric, as we get ready to observe some more spring practice. Were there any players that you hope to see more from that you didn't get a chance to look at? And I'm guessing it's probably defensive focus, considering you were offensive focused in Friday's practice.
Yeah, when I saw the question, I thought, does he mean I saw somebody and I liked him so much I want to see more, or players I didn't see much of? Okay. And so I went with players I didn't see much of. So we were on the same page there.
Good.
I went with Jaden Greathouse because he and Chris Terek and Leonard Moore were three guys that were just going to miss the first couple practices with some really minor injuries. So Greathouse, I want to see what he looks like. We haven't seen him play in a long time. And Chris Terek is another guy, because I do think he's in the mix, at least to be with the twos, and maybe he could be the surprise guy that finally jumps into the starting lineup. But I do want to see what he looks like at offensive guard. Jonas Walton, I want to see more of him. I think he's got a lot of potential to be in that rotation, and yet, man, there's going to be a lot of competition to be in there, because I think Aeneas is a given, and it feels like Nolan James is a given. But I think Walton is going to look different each week. I think he's going to look a little bit better as he gets more familiar. I want to see more Will Black, more Anthony Knapp, more Matty Augustine, everybody on defense, and kickers and punters. How about you?
So that's all, huh?
That's it. Well, that's why we go to practice.
Yeah, no, I know that I tried. I had a moment on Friday where I was like, okay, I got to focus somewhere, because otherwise I'm looking all over the place. I'm paralyzed with too much to be able to watch at the same time.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult. It was almost a blessing to be said, okay, you're doing the offensive practice report. Then I knew I had to focus on that, because you do want to. There's so much curiosity. There's so many newcomers. I mean, think about it. It's never been this many.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably like a handful of guys that are freshmen or transfers that I might not even like registered seeing them at Friday's practice, because there's just so many of them. Over 30 of those guys. Now all of them aren't practicing because there are some injured guys there, but it's a lot of new bodies and a lot of new numbers too. And so getting used to all that is certainly something. I said the tight end position in general. I felt I watched some of their early individual work, but I didn't get to see a ton of them in practice. I do remember like there was one deep ball thrown to Cooper Flanagan, and I think there was maybe another one to him as well that was like forced, and I think might in a real game might have got him killed because it was a forced throw that CJ Carr was trying to get to him, but there was clearly a safety there ready to make a play on the ball. And so I wanted to see more from that group. Micah Gilbert was another guy that, at least in whatever I was watching when I was watching, I seemed to have lost him in terms of tracking what he was doing. So I think this is a big spring for him. So I want to see a little bit more from Micah Gilbert. Obviously, the offensive line, like you mentioned, as they get more into real football as spring football proceeds, to get to see what those guys look like as they add more physicality to their game and responsibilities in terms of and challenges in terms of the new defensive lineman they're going against. So, and then the linebackers, I try not to spend too much time on linebackers in a practice like that, just because you're not going to, there's not a lot for them to do when they're not tackling guys yet. And so that's a group that I hope to see some more of. And we'll plan to try to keep my eyes on moving forward.
And I'm going to keep my
Is there
eyes
anything
on
else?
all the fights. I'm going to be watching
all the
Fight
fights.
Club.
We need a fight count, and then we need to declare who won the fight. We need to give we need round grades who won the rounds, because it was interesting to see how chippy they were out of the first practice. I guess it's been a while since they were out practicing, given the early end to last season. All right, Scott Fegan says, guys, will Lambert be an upgrade at right tackle, and will Black start at left tackle? Does this look like Notre Dame's best set of tackles? Will the O-line be a better unit than last year?
Okay, let me start with, will they be a better unit than last year? If Charles Jaggers is in that offensive line and he's healthy and they stay healthy all year, I think they could be one of the top 3 offensive lines in the country. We'll be talking about Joe Moore Award being the bar for them. If he's not, I still think they're going to be a better offensive line than last year. I think they'll be more physical. And they lost, 2 really good players, but without Charles Jaggers, I think they can be really good. Why don't you answer those parts, and then we'll do the other parts, Tyler, to this question?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's hard to. I feel like it's getting harder to say that about Charles Jaggers' impact when he gets back, because of how many setbacks he has had. So like, I think Charles Jaggers at his close to what we're used to seeing from him when he's actually able to play on the field, if he's playing at that level, I would agree that he can elevate the level of this line, whether he's playing at tackle or guard. My confidence in that going into next season is waning a little bit. Obviously, I'll give the guy a chance. It's up to him to be able to. Well, I guess it's not only up to him. He's dealing with some things that are out of his control. But he can, if allowed to, give him by the healing of his bones, get his strength back, and get back to where we know he can be. I do think that this year's line can be better. I'm not, and part of it goes into, okay, does the first line we saw on Friday, how does that alignment stay the same and change with or without Jaggers? I don't know, but I do think there is potential there. I think there is, as long as the next guy up on that left side, whether it's Will Black or Charles Jaggers or someone else, if Knapp moves back to tackle and someone's at guard, like if that person can bring a more physical presence, and do things there. And then I think Lambert on the right side, I think, can be a difference maker. Like, I do think he can take the right tackle position to another level than Emil Wagner did during his last season at Notre Dame.
Okay, and then I'll answer that specific part. Yeah, I think Lambert has a higher ceiling than Emil, in part just because he's physically bigger. He's more powerful than Emil was. Emil was a great technician, a great leader, a really good athlete. I think Gerby gives you all of that plus the size. I mean, 6'7" and 320-ish. I just think he's going to be special at right tackle, and he's in his wheelhouse now. This is what he's best at. Will Black and Knapp were really interesting to see them line up next to each other, because even though there's only 2 inches difference in their height and maybe 20 pounds difference in their weight, it's a marked difference when you look at those guys next to each other. It looks like somebody's little brother. And I thought Knapp really played well inside. I think that's his wheelhouse. Can Will Black be a left tackle? Yeah, I think he's athletic enough to do that. Really eager to see how this plays out, but I don't think this is the final configuration. I think Joe Rudolph's going to want to experiment with some things over the course of spring. I'm really curious to see what happens with Matty Augustine, because I know he is of that next wave of linemen. He's it. I mean, they're like, how are we going to keep him off the field? And where does he pop up? Does he pop up? Is there just too many experienced guys that are ahead of him?
Yeah, I think if we're talking like once we get into the season in terms of the whole unit, like Ashton Craig being able to stay healthy could go a long way in Notre Dame being able to improve its offensive line play as well. I'm interested in Black in terms of what he can do. I don't think it should be surprising if Anthony Knapp plays guard well, because I think that's what most of us thought he could do. I want to see a left tackle be better than Anthony Knapp, and I think there's a chance Will Black can, but I think some people just assume that those guys are going to be better than Anthony Knapp is, and I think some folks in the fan base have maybe taken for granted the job Anthony Knapp has done in his first 2 years at Notre Dame at left tackle.
I do think people take Anthony Knapp for granted, and I think they always will, just because he was a 3-star prospect.
Yeah.
Even though Joe Alt was also, but Joe Alt had a dad that was an NFL player, and I think that, and then he was 6'8" too. That
right
changed the dynamic there. But I mean, when Will Black walked in the door, I talked to somebody in the Goog, and they said, "Wow, he moves like a 5-star." I mean, it's just, how can he get adjusted to the speed of the game? Yeah. And that finally started happening for him in November, and then through their December and January workouts. And now he's in a real position where we can see truly where he is. Where does that land? So for me, that's really exciting. I think one other thing I want to ask you about while we're on this question that Scott asked is center. What if Ashton Craig isn't back at the beginning of the season? I mean, do you feel like it defaults just to Joe Otting, or do you think there's a chance Sullivan Absher or even Anthony Knapp could end up being the starting center if they know that Ashton Craig is going to be out for a while at the beginning of the season? And we don't think that that's going to happen.
To me, for one of those guys to move over, whether it would be Knapp or Absher, or to maybe be better options than Joe Otting, I think that would have to start sooner rather than later. Like I think Joe Otting is good enough where if you go into the season, you know what, Ashton Craig is going to maybe take a week or two longer than we thought. I think you're fine playing Joe Otting. I don't think he is a weakness necessarily at that center position. Now, if you feel like it's more of a long-term thing that you're trying to solve, I think it's worth experimenting with an Anthony Knapp or Sullivan Absher. I personally, Knapp makes more sense to me as someone who's more agile. I mean, shorter doesn't necessarily always help you on the offensive line, but that's one position where it is maybe a little bit helpful because you're not right in front of your quarterback standing really tall, and Sullivan Absher is a pretty tall guy compared to Anthony Knapp. And so that is an intriguing option. I'm not sure. I would want that to be, those wheels to be in motion sooner rather than later than something that you wait till August and try to figure that out. And so I'll be curious to see if, and I should say, I'm not Joe Rudolph. He doesn't seem to like, he seems to be willing to be like, you know what, let's try this. Like he's not against sort of moving guys and taking chances and figuring out what guys can do. So we'll see how that plays out. But I do think Joe Otting is stable enough at that center position that you don't have to move either of those guys.
And I'll just point out that Notre Dame is looking at a quarterback in the Tampa Bay area that's 6'7", so maybe they're doing that with in mind, thinking Absher might be a center someday.
All right, another question from Scott. Will Notre Dame run a 5 or 6 deep wide receiver unit? There's a lot of talent. We're curious as to who the top 5 or 6 will be, and does Notre Dame throw more this year?
I definitely think they throw more this year. I think it's pretty easy for me to identify the top 4. Will they be 6 deep? Man, based on the first day, I am open to the idea that they will be 6 deep and maybe have a unit that plays behind them that kind of rolls in if they're way ahead and get those guys some work. But I really feel like we're going to see a lot of Mylan Graham, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, and Quincy Porter. But Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, they're really pushing. And, Bubba Frazier was impressive. There were a lot of people, maybe Elijah Burris has a big day one day. I think Kadon Finley, by the end of the spring, we'll be talking about him. He had some drops, he had some good moments, and he had some freshman moments. Devin Fitzgerald's at that boundary too with Jerome Bettis Jr. There's 14 guys, and none of them run like I do. So so there's a lot
as opposed to years past.
Yeah. So there's yeah. It's like, wait a second, is he media or is he one of the wide receiver core? But I think 6 is a realistic number, but I think that top 4 is going to play a lot. But I think that's a better question for later in the spring, where it's a good question now. We'll have a better answer later in the spring. How's that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Of the 3 positions, I feel like the boundary one is the one that it's interesting, because I think Quincy Porter, if he reaches his potential, like his potential might be higher than anyone else's in the receiver room, regardless of position. But he's also maybe as unproven as anyone else that could be a starter going into next season. So I think there's probably going to be room for rotation at that position, unless he does meet the high expectations that many have for him. So if Micah Gilbert can stay healthy and do some of the things that we think he can do, if maybe Cam Williams continues to impress and finds a way to get onto the field, and then you sort of have 3 guys in the other 2 spots that you think are definitely going to play a lot with Faison, Greathouse, and Mylan Graham. And then who else emerges from in those spots? I like Elijah Burris. I don't know that there was necessarily something we saw on Friday's practice that was like, okay, it's Elijah Burris's time. But there's potential there. Bubba, I agree with the fact that you said Bubba Frazier looked good. I was impressed by him and like him as a receiver, and Caden Finley getting opportunities in the slot. I'm curious how that develops as he moves forward and grows into his game here at Notre Dame.
The one thing too about Cam Williams is he can flip over to the field. If the depth isn't as good on the field side, he can be that guy on that side, and that the boundary is too loaded.
Right. All right. Let's do a little bit of buy or sell. Eric, these will be heavily influenced by our first practice viewing. So these are, I would say, maybe overreactions, and maybe probably too soon to say any of these things, but I thought maybe this could maybe help us explain what we think is real and what we think is maybe a mirage. That's something we talked a little bit about last week. So I think I have 6 of them here for us. First one I have is buy or sell. Mylan Graham's best fit is in the slot.
I'm selling that. I think that he can be equally as good at the field receiver, and I think we will see him at both.
Yeah, I'm in the same position. I would sell for now because I think he can do a lot of things, and not that. I mean, I do think there is potential that he can excel in the slot, but I'm not ready to limit him to that quite yet. All right, next one, buy or sell. Cam Williams will catch 10-plus passes this season.
I'm buying that.
All right. I'm going to sell it, but I would be happy to see it. I think the potential of Porter and Gilbert blocking him makes me a little bit nervous for that in terms of the reception totals. But I also think that the opportunity that Notre Dame's offense maybe passes the ball more this season gives him some more opportunities there as well. All right, buy or sell. Running back Nolan James Jr. will be in the rotation this season.
I'm buying it, and it's not just based on the one practice. It's what the rumblings you heard last year, and he didn't play a lot last year. I mean, he redshirted. He had some cameos. I think maybe 14 carries last year. But what you heard from the coaches in press conferences, what you kind of heard the rumblings behind the scenes, people really, really liked him. And again, he's not a 5-star recruit, and yet I think you would be foolish not to consider that he will be in the rotation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, especially given the fact that I think there's a chance that the rotation goes 2-3, like that Jawan Sider is willing to not just rely on two guys when the two guys are first or second round draft picks potentially. And so I think there's a chance for that. I think he looks good. I think I've been excited about Javian Osborne. Him having the setback with the wrist injury to put him out this spring is doesn't help him, right? I mean, it doesn't mean he can't overcome that, but it certainly isn't something helping his chances to earn a spot in the rotation as a freshman. So I think I like Nolan James, and I like what he did in practice on Friday, and not just because his last name is James. All right, buy or sell. Tay Johnson can be an All-American in 2026.
Are you kidding me? That's not even a question.
You're like the guys at the stock exchange. Buy.
Exactly. And that's not
two phones up to your ears.
Yeah, and that's not based on Friday's practice. I was saying that last year. I think he'll be an All-American this year. And I would. Those guys. It's funny that he and Mylan Graham are such good friends. They're from the same hometown, because there was something in the water there with those two.
Yeah, they got some good athletes over in Fort Wayne. I buy as well. He's a stud. Simple as that. Buy or sell. Linebacker Ka'okia will make an impact this spring.
In the spring, yes. I think once everybody gets back and healthy, especially if Kingston Biliamu Asa is part of the recovery group that's back at the beginning of the season, I think it's going to be hard for Ko. But I also think he is somebody that the staff feels really good about in that next wave of linebackers, and he needs to play and he needs to practice. This is a big spring for him, because eventually he's going to be competing for a starting spot when that roster turns over.
Yeah, I limited it to the spring, so it's more like, is this a guy we're going to be continuing to talk about throughout the spring because of the hard road ahead in terms of making an impact next season with all the linebackers that are returning? But I think he's going to get opportunities to do so this spring, so I'm buying. I was interested in actually seeing if his older brother could make that impact this spring, but he's injured, so Ko is stepping up, and we'll see if he can continue to do that after an impressive first practice. All right, our last buy or sell is freshman defensive end Roddy Dunham will record multiple sacks in 2026.
This was probably my one that I was least confident about, but I said I'm buying that. And I'm basing it on the fact that I think there's going to be opportunity to be in a defensive end rotation. Logan Thomas being at 215 pounds is still a little bit worrisome for me. And I also think Charlie Partridge will bring out the best in Roddy Dunham. But you mentioned Ebenezer Iwatade. I mean, maybe he ends up being the guy of those two that gets more reps this year. But I buy, but that's one where I'm not going buy.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm buying it. I think he's good. I think he's putting it together. I think we're going to see pretty good growth from my understanding of Rodney Dunham as a player, like we're going to see some significant growth from now until the fall, and I think he's going to continue to take the next step. He's a guy that had a knee injury late in his junior season, I believe, and so he was coming back from that last year. So I think he's continuing. Like he played his senior season, maybe not at his total physical peak in high school, and was pretty good. And I think he's getting there, and with the opportunities to continue to grow at Notre Dame, I think he's going to be pretty impressive. All right, I thought we could hop into some pro day results real quick. Notre Dame held its pro day in the IAC day. Who do you think helped themselves the most with their testing performances? Were you able to check any of that out?
From their testing without including the position drills, Will Pauling had a really good day. I mean, 42-inch vertical leap, and 10.8 standing broad jump, 4.37 40. He also did the 20-yard shuttle and the 3-cone drill. That was impressive. He did not do the bench press today. And then, to me, Devontae Smith, even though it was a 4.55 40, and that's not bad, his other numbers were really good. Lauren Landau talked about how important the jumps are. Mm-hmm. He had a 43-inch vertical jump and 11 feet even broad jump. And this is the standing broad jump. People say 11 feet, because they're used to seeing a long jump in the 20s. And for somebody to go 11 feet, you're just standing there. You're not getting a running start at that. 11 feet is really good. His numbers were good across the board. He had the best 3-cone drill, which shows your agility. So I thought Devontae Smith helped himself. Those two the most.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those are the two obvious eye openers in terms of the numbers they put up. A couple other guys I wanted to shout out: Gabriel Rubio showing his strength with 26 reps on the bench press. That was good to see. I thought Jordan Botello had a decent day as well with 21 reps on the bench press, a 36.5-inch vertical, a 4.24 shuttle was pretty good for a guy his size. So I thought he had a decent day. Like he's not flying with a 40-yard dash necessarily, but someone that I think maybe this gets him into a camp with some of the things he showed today, and someone that has some athletic traits that I think the NFL would like to see.
Yeah, the kickers and the punters didn't. I would have loved to see James Rendell run the 40. I would have been curious. Billy Strouth didn't do any of the testing today.
Yeah, there was a video of Jeremiah Love mic'd up a little bit during today's events, and Jeremiah Love didn't participate in anything. He was just there cheering on his teammates, but he was talking to different guys, and he said something to James Rendell about you didn't want to run, and James joked that he didn't want to make everyone look bad. So I thought that was pretty funny. Mike DeVoy wanted to get in our buy or sell game. He said, buy or sell, Notre Dame's defensive linemen this year have at least 10 more sacks than last year's defensive linemen.
I will say yes, because I think Notre Dame is going to make the playoff and make a run. So, based on they have more games to do it. Will they have more per game and make that average stand out? I think so. I want to answer you in about 2 weeks because I really want to see what Keeley and Bryce Young are doing, and I want to talk more with Charlie Partridge. He's really fun to talk to. You learn a lot of football from him. I just was super impressed with him, and I want to see what that translates to on the field. So I'm going to defer. I'll let Tyler be the psychic here and give you a better answer.
Yeah, I think I'm too conservative here. I don't know that I'm ready to buy that yet. I sort of agree with you that it feels too early to make that. Like, I think if Keon Keeley hits his potential, and Francis Brew and some of those guys on the interior do better than the guys did last year, then you could get there. But I think in one small practice, just in watching O-line, D-line, one-on-one pass rush, I thought Notre Dame's offensive line won the majority of them by a pretty wide margin as it relates to the first team. So that I would not use that small sample size in terms of projecting, but if we're going off of things I've seen, I just think it's too soon to by that big of an improvement. I do think there's certainly a chance for that, but I'd like to see more of that progression to get a better sense for, okay, who are the guys that are going to do that for sure, that I feel good about before saying that right now.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for people that are on social media sometimes because spring football is a trap, and you can over extrapolate things. And I think there's a race to be by some people to be more breathless in their extrapolations than the next person. And then some people that are doing that aren't even at practice. They're reading our reports and then they are putting it into AI. Well, sometimes AI isn't artificial intelligence, it's actual ignorance. So be careful about some of these graphics that you're seeing.
All right. I like that one. I'm about as anti-AI as you can get. So I like that one. Mike DeVoy had another question. Is Cam Williams twitchy enough to be in the slot?
I talked to somebody about that, and he could line up at any of the spots. I just think there's too many good options in the slot right now. I think if he's going to excel, it's going to be at one of the outside receiver positions. And I think it's better for him in terms of his learning to not throw a third position at him. I think it's better if he's one of the two outside positions.
Yeah, Cam was someone that came to Notre Dame needing to work a lot on his route running, and to add the slot receiver into that equation for him, feels like, okay, this is another thing that he's got to learn. I don't know that I would be a proponent of that. Certainly, I think there are different kinds of slots you can play. You can play bigger body slots and do different things with them. Jaden Thomas was someone that Notre Dame did stuff with like that at times with it. It's almost like a better receiving version of a tight end at times in ways, but I wouldn't expect that to be Cam Williams' best path to the playing field this next season. All right. Jeff says, what? Some social media people aren't at practice. You'd be surprised to the amount of people that are tweeting about practice that aren't at practice.
There's some YouTube shows, and there's guys I've never seen before in my life that are going on there. They're taking our practice reports or other outlets' practice reports. They throw it through an AI script, and they put the little agenda on the right side, and they talk about things as if they are there. And it's like, wow, that's pretty interesting.
That's not exactly the best insight that you're going to get. All right. I think that's most everything except for recruiting stuff. And so I wanted to start our recruiting talk with a question from Jeff Stevens. Big recruiting weekend just finished. What is the one recruit that you would have said won't happen for Notre Dame and after this weekend now is likely to end up at Notre Dame? I don't know that there's anyone that I would say won't happen that I would now consider likely. I would say there's two guys that I feel better about potentially ending up at Notre Dame. Likely is probably too strong. I would say Albert Simeon, the offensive lineman, is a 5-star offensive lineman, and defensive end Zyron Forstall. Forstall, actually, they're both from Louisiana. Forstall plays at IMG Academy in Florida, and Albert Simeon's from Louisiana as well. But Forstall originates from Louisiana, if I have my memory correct there. So those are the two guys that I would say is, I don't know that I necessarily believed it going into the visit. And now I can start to see it as a possibility, but likely is probably too strong. I don't know that there's anyone that I would classify as, I didn't think there was a chance, and now after they visited, they're likely. I don't think there was anyone that made that sizable of a leap. I think even some of these guys that maybe hadn't visited before, you hear enough things that it's like, okay, this is maybe a Notre Dame kid, so I think he could potentially end up at Notre Dame if he likes what he sees on this visit and the visit goes well. So that would be how I would classify that. I just wanted to. So Simeon and Forstall were guys that I was going to mention. The other two, or the other guys I was going to mention that I would say were more expected. How would I say, the recruits who I would expect, who going into the visit I expected things to go well with, and they did, and I think are trending in the right direction for Notre Dame. This is the list that I came up with: Braden Parks, a defensive tackle out of Chicago; offensive lineman Cameron Wagner out of Illinois; running back Trey Segara out of I believe it's North Carolina; or maybe South Carolina, one of the Carolinas. Safety Zayden Gamble out of Florida, defensive tackle Aiden O'Neal out of New Jersey, and then tight end Cooper Terwilliger out of South Dakota. You don't hear us talking about South Dakota recruits very often, but he was on campus, and I think things went well with him. So those are some of the names to watch coming out of this junior day visit. They're going to keep having guys. There'll be guys on campus tomorrow. There's guys on campus throughout the week and into the weekend. This week is probably the next biggest week beyond last week for the spring until we get to the blue gold game. So plenty more coverage coming from our teammates over at blueandgold.com, led by Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly. And I'll be helping out. I'll put together another heat index update for later in the week. Wanted to make sure we get all the information we can out of this past weekend before getting another update out there. So
okay,
I think
I've got a recruiting comment and a question.
All right, give it to me.
My recruiting comment is the first two guys you named were on the Inside ND Sports podcast when it was labeled that. Now we are the Third and Gold podcast, but I just want to point that out that they were guests.
That's right, bro.
And then I was not in South Bend, so I do want to know what the weather was like. And I will tell you what it was in Columbus, Ohio, where I was covering women's basketball. When I left the arena after interviews on Sunday, it was 86 degrees. It was kind of middling on Saturday, and on Monday it was a high of like 37. So it was all over. So what was the weather like in South Bend for Junior Day?
Yeah, it was nice. They had nice weather. I'm not sure what the temperatures were exactly. I wasn't clocking the temperatures, but it was nice. It was a pleasant day. They hit the lottery in terms of weather for their Junior Day when they even had guys coming in on Thursday and Friday, and they had pretty good weather. It wasn't as nice. It got nicer into Saturday. And then, yeah, we got back to being cold, but I think everyone got out of South Bend that was a recruiting visitor before the temperature got colder. We haven't had any snow come back yet, but the coldness did hold off, and Notre Dame got pretty fortunate because sometimes with March visits, you never know what's going to happen with the weather. And Notre Dame got lucky, or maybe God was looking down on Notre Dame and wanted to make sure they had good weather that day. But I think that'll do it for us this week on Football Never Sleeps. Probably back to Monday next week. I guess it would depend. I don't know the women's basketball possibilities well enough.
Well, I will tell you what the possibilities are. They play Friday and Sunday, so we will be back on Monday next week.
All right, cool. So plan for us on Monday. We appreciate everyone adjusting with us for a Tuesday night episode. If you're not subscribed to blueandgold.com, check us out. 50% off this spring for first-time subscribers for an annual subscription. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like on this video, and let us know who your spring surprise so far is. That'll do it. We'll see you guys next week.